Tune in to the Diva Hustle Show.
Hey, you guys, thanks for tuning in. Today, our guest is Jerry Brooks, creator and author of Good Together. Thank you, Jerry, for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me.
So, what people don't know, you and I, we talked, I think it was last year, right? We was talking about relationships. So, I had came up with some good questions. I figure let's just dive right on into it, right?
Awesome. I'm ready.
So with everything going on in the world, we have a lot of relationships that's breaking up, getting divorced. So what would you suggest some of the signs, the subtle signs that may have couples drift apart? And how can these couples recognize and address these signs before it's too late?
Oh, that's a good question. So the thing is, yeah, there's this phrase that people use, "Oh, we grew apart."
Hmm.
It's like, well, I mean, let's take it literally, like a plant. It's like, oh yeah, plants have to grow. That's what they need to do to get better. But of course, if you have two plants side by side, if they grow in different directions,
Hmm.
then they are growing apart, literally. Um, but then you'll find some plants that become intertwined and grow together.
Hmm.
So what people are saying when they say, "Oh, we've grown apart," honestly, it means that you haven't included your partner in your relationship.
Hmm.
You've gone out, you struck out on your own, and you did things and you didn't include them. Now, it may be that they didn't include themselves.
Hmm.
So I'm not, please understand, I'm not, trying to place blame. Um, it's just something that actually naturally happens. As life goes on, we get curious about different things. I know I am not the same I was when I was, 16. And I'll be honest, that's a good thing. I'm glad I'm not the same I was when I was 16. I was really dumb. I had a different view of the world.
Right.
Thankfully, I have matured. And again, I've grown and I continue to grow. And so, life presents us with different scenarios and situations. And so, depending on how we handle those and how we either include or exclude the people around us in our relationships, and that's not just intimate relationships,
Hmm.
it's friends and family. We can push people away or we can draw people in.
Right.
And so, it depends on how you go about your relationship as to whether you're going to continue to grow together
Hmm.
or if you're just going to grow apart and be two completely different people who are just, sharing the same space. Um, so yeah, that's one of those things where, um, like I say, here's the thing: you actually have a lot of control
Right.
over your relationship, and it gets frustrating to me when I hear people act as though, oh, life just happened.
Hmm. Hmm.
No, it didn't just happen. We didn't just grow apart.
Right.
You were an active participant in that, and you could have chosen to do it differently, but you chose to grow apart. And I'll be honest. I mean, look, it's happened to me in my relationships. This is how I know it. Please don't think that I'm something special and I had the answers. No, things happened in my relationships, and then I had to go out and figure out, okay, what did I do? How did I screw this up?
Right.
Because
Right.
I'm just not good at this.
Right.
Um, and that's when I realized, like, I wasn't paying enough attention to my relationships. I was doing the things that I wanted to do, and I wasn't including the other people in the relationship.
Mhm.
Um, and they too, I mean, and maybe it was that they got frustrated with me and they just had enough. And they're like, well, if you're not going to include me, I'm going to go do me.
Right.
I mean, that's a definite possibility. I can't, again, I'm not placing blame. I'm just pointing that I wasn't paying attention and no one told me, hey, you really need to make an effort because it's not like, sadly, look, I grew up watching these rom-coms
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I learned about relationships. And of course, everything I learned was just foolish. But you believe that, oh, I'm going to see someone across the room, we're going to fall madly in love, and everything's going to work out. And then there's happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, that's actually where the story begins, not where the story ends. And so when you get into a relationship, you have to be an active participant and you have to really work at it. Although, look, I don't like using that word work because work is something you do for someone else. Work is usually something that you do that you don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I choose to use the word effort. And even fun times require effort. You have to be present. You have to show up. You have to, get yourself involved. You have to do something in order to have fun. Fun doesn't just happen um, spontaneously or without any effort by
Right.
the participants to enjoy themselves and have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, relationships are effort. And like I say, so there's the phrase, and my uncle used to say it, it's Confucius that says, if you find a job you love, then um, there, it won't be any work at all.
Okay.
And that's the thing, you're enjoying yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're in a relationship that you enjoy, it's not work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you think that your relationship is work, then you need to either change your attitude or change your relationship because you're not having a good time. You're not doing it, because you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so the big thing is, uh, pay attention to your relationship and include the other person as much as you can.
And I think another thing that you touched on, and this was in your book as well, communication and relationships. And so, how can couples go beyond a surface level of communicating or conversating to truly understand each other's emotions and needs and desires?
Well, actually, so funny that you should say. So I've created an app called the
Right.
Good Together Game
Mm-hmm.
to try and help people with this. Um, I make it a game because again, I want it to be fun. I don't want it to be work and an effort. But the game is actually very simple. You load in the people for your relationships, and then you pick a person, and the game randomly chooses one of the people, and it randomly chooses a time frame, 3, 5, or 7 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
because people don't realize how quickly we communicate with each other, and I think that's one of the problems is that people hear this about, oh, how do we communicate? And people are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to spend hours.
Mm-hmm.
First, I'm going to have to learn how to communicate. And then we're going to have to sit down and have these long, drawn out conversations. I'm going to have to bare my soul and be vulnerable. And no, that none of that is true, actually. We connect with each other very quickly and very easily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, there's a list of activities that I've preloaded depending on the relationship style. So if it's family or friends or business or intimate, uh, you load the person into that social circle, and then you're presented with a list of activities. And the thing is, you can actually add your own activities. You can add your own groups and stuff like that. So depending on, I don't know enough about you and your relationship, and I don't want to pretend that I do.
Right.
So it's up to you to again get involved and make an effort, and you can create different activities to do with different people depending on what your relationship is.
Right.
So yeah, communication is actually on the one hand it's fairly easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need to be a long drawn out process. um, I will say that none of us does it right. So we can kind of stop thinking that it's like, oh, I'm going to be a master at communicating.
Right.
I don't even know what that means anymore.
Right.
But again, you have to make an effort. Look, I will accept that you're not the best communicator,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're not even trying then it doesn't matter. You might be the best communicator there is. And if you never open your mouth, guess what? No communication will get done.
Right.
So, you just have to make that effort. You have to try to communicate with each other. And again, you have to be inclusive, which means you have to share. So, yeah, I'll get kind of deep here. I'll use the word love.
Okay.
People want to throw around.
Mm-hmm.
And the first question is, okay, what does that mean? Because most people don't have a definition of what love is.
Right.
Well, I actually do have a definition. It's a basic it's the core tenets of what it means to love.
Mm-hmm.
And without this, you don't have love. I'm just saying. Now, I'm not trying to describe. It's like describing a car.
Mm-hmm.
I can describe a car without describing your car.
Right.
And your car is going to go into a lot more detail, of what that means to you. But so the first item of love is knowledge. You can't love someone that you don't know.
Right.
And because that's going to be the first thing that people are going to ask, what is it that you love about me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I have to know something. I can't say, hey, Paris, I love the fact that you knit. If you don't knit, that would be foolish, right? I mean,
Right.
so I
Right.
have to like base my love on what I know about you,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something meaningful. So the second item then is sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't know what you haven't shared.
Right.
If you never told me that you knit, then I can't know if that's something that you do.
Right.
You have to actually share yourself with me. The more you share, the more opportunity I have to love you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the deeper our love, because the more things you share and the more meaningful those things are that you share, then you're being vulnerable with me, and
Mm-hmm.
you're allowing me to get to know you uh, more deeply. And so it enhances this thing that we're going to call love between us. And so it's a back and forth. You have to share with me, and I have to share with you. Um, there again, using my own relationships, this is how I came to all of this.
Right.
Um, I'm a sharing person, and I would share aspects of my life. I really enjoy cooking, and so I would share that with people. I would share food and cooking. Um, I would share my past, past relationships and things that have happened to me. It made me feel like I was connecting with someone, but what I missed was they weren't sharing back.
Right. But do
They
you
didn't.
feel that they wasn't sharing back because when they didn't feel maybe safe to share back? Because and then it's not saying you, but maybe because previous relationships where they shared and opened up, they was hurt. So when they came to you, they just had that wall up.
That could be. And the thing is, I don't know why they didn't share. That's a definite possibility. Like you say, though, it may have been that they just didn't want to connect with me. So
Right.
that they didn't want to tell me their dark secrets because they're like, I don't like you enough. And so, and that's a possibility. So I wasn't paying attention enough to say, oh, wait, I'm doing all the sharing. This person isn't sharing with me. And so regardless of why, that's kind of a side note. It's not as important why you're not sharing with me.
Right.
It's really important that you are not sharing with me. And I have
Right.
to like step back and go, okay, wait, this relationship isn't going where I'm hoping for it to go.
Right.
Um, and then there's a third item, caring.
Mhm.
And caring there again has three parts to it. There's time,
Mhm.
and time has the quantity and quality.
Mhm.
So if you spend a lot of time with me, that's good. And if the time that you do spend with me is significant and important, that's even better.
Mhm.
So there's high quality and high quantity. Um, and here's the thing. So there again, caring is another thing that people will comment about and say, "Oh, I care."
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, what does that mean? And I'm actually giving you things you can measure.
Mhm. Mhm.
You're not literally going to pull out a stopwatch and say, okay, how much time do we spend?
Right.
But you can judge and go, wait, we really don't spend a lot of time with each other. And the time we spend together, well, we just do frivolous things. We don't really get deep. And so, yeah, this time isn't meaningful. And then the next thing is the effort you put in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, we can again has effort has a quality and a quantity. Do
Mm-hmm.
you put a lot of effort in? And is the effort that you make, is it significant and
Mm-hmm.
worthy? Um, and the other part that is, I could look at myself. I
Mm-hmm.
can say, okay, wait, do I care about Paris because how much time and effort do I put into our relationship? Um, you know, so I can measure it both ways. I can measure what I'm receiving, but also what I'm putting out.
Yeah.
Um, one of the jokes is, people say, oh, I really want to learn a language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so are you studying the language? Well, no.
Right.
Are you watching videos? No. Have you bought
Mm-hmm.
any courses? No. You don't care about learning that language. Now you're just talking about pie in the sky fantasy things that you really aren't invested in. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, you can't learn a language if you're not taking the time and making the effort.
Right.
Well, you can't have a relationship, you can't have love if you're not taking the time and putting in the effort. And the last item for caring is sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, when do you put the relationship first?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you there. So I had a person, and I used the term friend because I thought we were friends.
Okay.
But what I realized is whenever it came to choosing between me and anything else, he always chose everything else.
Okay.
He never chose me.
Okay.
So it's like if something better came up and we had plans, oh well, Jerry, you
Mm-hmm.
lose because
Okay.
he's going to go do something else. And I realized this person isn't my friend
Right.
because he's never putting me. And I didn't. And really, look, don't always. I'm going to say, don't always put the other person above everything.
Right.
That's an extreme, and I'm not talking about extremes, but never putting the other person above anything is the opposite extreme.
Mm-hmm.
So at least some of the time, choose your relationship over something else that you could have been doing. People do this a lot with work, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
They choose work over their relationship. And they're like, oh, well, I need to go do work and I need to do this, that, and the other. It's like, well, sometimes work has to take a back seat. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes your family, your friends, your intimate partner, sometimes they have to win out and you need to choose them over work or something else. And so yeah, so caring is time, effort, and sacrifice.
Yeah.
They all have a quality and a quantity, and you can in general gauge that if you're spending time and effort and making sacrifices, that's a part of caring. Then that determines what you share.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What you share determines what you know, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't love what you don't know. So those three tie together really tightly. And like I say, if you don't know something about the other person, either because they haven't shared it or because you're not sharing, um, and if you're not spending the time and effort and making sacrifices for this relationship, you really don't care. And so those are things right there that tell you how good your relationship is, both on your end and on the other person.
So, when do you feel, or what's your opinion on relationships when you feel like these issues come up, like communication? Do you feel like that's a mirror for maybe a mirror for that individual to work have issues to work on? Like it might be something that how I feel like. How can I say this? I feel like when the universe comes and like say you and I have you. You're like Pam. You're not sharing. So I feel like that's the universe putting up a mirror that's an issue that I need to work on. So could that be issues coming up in a relationship?
Oh, without a doubt. But like say, it takes two. And
Right.
so, okay, here's a little tip I'm going to give people. Um, Whenever you're talking to someone, like when you're, getting to know someone,
Mhm.
usually that entails questions, right? You're asking about the other person.
Mhm.
okay, you have to answer the question first.
Okay.
Answer your own question, because that sets a foundation of A, what am I asking and how do I expect a response?
Okay.
So if you ask me, hey, Jerry, how are you doing today? Then you have to answer it first and say, I am doing this, that, and the other. And then I know, oh, I see what you're asking.
Okay.
You're asking, how are things going? Or I mean, it tells me like, oh, like if you were trying to get to know me and you go, oh, hey, Jerry, tell me about your family.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your family, because are you asking like how many brothers and sisters I have, how old they are, where they live? I mean, the list goes on and on. I don't know what you've just asked.
Right.
That's communication right there.
Okay.
And that's how you get better at it. Because if you answer your own question, you suddenly realize, oh, wait, I didn't ask that question well at all.
Okay.
But it also now tells me, oh, I see what you're asking. So we're not going to spend the next, hour with me trying to explain something. And then you're going, Jerry, I didn't ask you that.
Right.
You,
Right.
I thought you did. So if you answer your own questions first,
Okay.
then it lets people know, oh, I understand what you're asking. And it makes you think about it yourself and go, wait, maybe I didn't ask that right. So what I'm asking is this, that, and the other. It's like, oh, I get you now. Okay. And so then I can answer. And then it's a nice back and forth between, it involves the other part of that too is it involves you in the conversation. I've been in a situation and it just works out that women tend to have a lot of questions, but they don't have a lot of answers.
Okay.
So I've been in the situation where I felt like it was a third degree. It's like, oh, Jerry, tell me this and tell me that. And some of that is bad conventional wisdom, because women have been told, get a guy to talk about himself and he'll like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's really poor relationship skills, though,
Mm-hmm.
because you're putting yourself second in the relationship and he's not learning about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's very selfish of him to just talk about himself. But then all you're doing is asking about him.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to make the situation to where it's like, okay, I'm going to ask a question, but I'm going to answer the question too,
Mm-hmm.
first, actually. So that way you're going to learn about me as much as I'm learning about you. And it's not lopsided anymore.
Right. Right.
It forces you to be a participant in the communication.
Right. And I feel what you're saying is absolutely right, especially like right now on social media, you have a lot of these relationship coaches saying, just ask him about the questions, just ask him about himself. And I feel like what happens is you just start a pattern. So
Yes.
everything becomes about him. And so at some point, the light bulb will come on in the woman head and be like, oh, you don't know me, you're ignoring
Yes,
me.
exactly. We don't have a relationship at that point. It's
Right,
just one-sided. It's just all about you. And
right,
it's like, no, that's not a relationship. It's not all about me.
right.
And I better be prepared. And so sadly, like say, for one, that's what a lot of coaches are telling people, which is really okay. So my big thing too is I am against conventional wisdom.
Okay.
And I really get at the heart of the psychology of what's going on. Look, that's where I started. I started with all the conventional wisdom and it didn't get me anywhere. I failed at every relationship.
Right.
And that's actually what happened with me is to tell your audience, I know you and I spoke a little bit, but it's like I gave up.
Right.
I was, in a relationship that ended badly, of course, because that's the way they do. And I just said, that's it. I can't do this. And I was really kind of surprised because I was like, wait a minute. I work with computers. I'm very logical, very technical. I will read books and I put in the effort. I was like, look, I was not just screwing off and not doing my homework.
Right.
I did my homework and I listened to coaches and I read books and I was like, okay, I tried everything. Asked friends and family, what am I doing?
Right.
What am I doing wrong? And they all had advice and it was all trash. Finally, when I stopped and And actually, here's the funny part. So I work with computers, and I dove into work, and I said, okay, I'm going to start understanding artificial intelligence. And this was about 15 years ago. So it's not even modern, it's not new. And some of the first questions that came out was, okay, what does it mean to be intelligent? Well, it's decision making. Okay, how do we make decisions? Well, we need information to make good decisions. If you have bad information, you're going to make bad decisions. That's just the way it works. And suddenly I realized, I said, oh my gosh, I've been making bad decisions. Well, what does that mean? I've had bad information.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, all this conventional wisdom that a lot of these people are throwing about is really bad.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I actually started then getting into the psychology and reading about people and how they interact in communication from actual experts, from people who study it, not people who just talk about it. And I started making notes to myself. I was like, oh, this is what I did wrong, and this is what I should have done, and this is what happened. Well, so I took my notes, excuse me. I decided, I'm not alone. Obviously, this is what's out there for everyone. And I'm like, no, this is bad, this is wrong. And so I went to someone and I said, hey, I want to put my notes up like on a website so people can read about what I've learned. Well, that person looked at it and said, oh, Jerry, you've written a book. And I was like, what do you mean? I didn't write a book. And she looked at it, she said, no, Jerry. She said, you have hundreds of pages of information and notes. This is a book. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I can count myself as an author who never wrote a book. So I have a book on Amazon that I didn't write as a book. I wrote it as notes to myself about, what I had done and why I should have done it differently. But then the other part was then I thought of it afterwards. And I was like, information is good, but I also know that people don't act on information and they need help. I've read too many books, even technical books, that I was like, okay, that sounds great, but how do I put this in practice? So that's where I came up with the game. And I said, I need to help people actually do this and give them things to do. And so that's why I created the app. And it is free, just so people know. And I don't collect any information. It's not anything like that. So, well, I know, they're going to work with computers, and I know people get frustrated with people apps collecting their data and selling their data. And that's not at all what this is about. It's about helping people to have better relationships. And so, yeah, I was like, okay, I know how this goes. Even though I've got the information, if I'm not actively trying to help people, then, well, maybe they'll read it, maybe they won't. If they read it, maybe they'll understand it, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll put it in practice, and maybe they won't. Maybe they won't know how to put it in practice. And so I really wanted to help people and say, okay, here's the information and here's how to use it.
Right. So can you tell me, in your own opinion, how can couples practice forgiveness while also maintaining healthy boundaries?
Oh, well, I think those are definitely linked to each other. I mean, you have to have healthy boundaries. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of setting limits and boundaries. Because there again, what I did is I didn't set limits and boundaries in my relationships. Again, because of bad conventional wisdom. When a lot of conventional wisdom, honestly, is very dangerous and detrimental to the individual. They tell you, oh, the relationship above all. And it's like, well, it has to be a healthy relationship in order for you to contribute. That's where I say you have to pay attention. Because just because I was in relationships, they weren't healthy because the other person wasn't participating. It was all me and not them. And so I should have set limits and boundaries as to, again, and this works with the communication. It's like, okay, I give a little, and I need to get a little bit back. And then I'll give a little bit more, and I expect to get more back. And so it has to be a give and take, and you have to be paying attention to what you're giving and what you're getting in return. And so, so you have to be vulnerable, and you have to build that trust, and you have to do that by giving a little and getting something back in return. So, trust and vulnerability are earned. You don't just
tune in to the Diva Hawks Show. Motivate the glow. We give you more info. Think to my head to toe. I let the whole world know. I let the whole world know.